All right. So so just like the internet, money started off decentralized, although just it was just in small families, but then it evolved into a centralized style solution in order to overcome all of the challenges that money kept facing, trying to keep pace with our progress or civilization progress. So we're going to go all the way back now and just point out that cooperation and exchange is not something that's just exclusive to humans. Most of nature has understood that you need to cooperate, you need to divide and conquer, and this is what enhances your chance at survival. And our ancestors were much the same. We had to work together as a team, or we were going to get killed. If you were alone, you were going to die. And so, we have to cooperate with each other. And to the idea of barter, I think we all get the idea of barter, but when you examine it closely, barter itself is almost impossible. It's not practical. When you have this division of labor between several different people, in order to exchange between any two of these people, they have to have the coincidence of wants. They need to want what they need what the other has, and they both need to do that at the exact same time. So Tim, as an example, people need a new tool about once a month, but he needs to trade new tools much more often than that, weekly or even daily, in order for him to get what he needs. So he's never going to line up. Very rarely is he going to line up to make that happen. And so the idea of an IOU is what solved this problem. These are, we covered these in depth already. They're very powerful and also very simple. So Tim is going to, or Calvin's gonna slaughter one cattle about once a month. He's gonna give to everybody the meat that they need. And then everybody just keeps a mental track of what they owe him and how they're gonna pay him back. And it's that simple, and it works phenomenally. And this is what we did for hundreds of thousands of years. But this is what we did between families for hundreds of thousands of years. But IOUs did not work between tribes. So at some point, these families would get curious on how can I trade with other families, and IOUs are not going to work in that situation because this family is not going to see this family that much. You don't know them. You might actually never see them again. So now salt and wheat enter the picture. And so this is a simple example. We have two strangers. They may never see each other again. This guy just wants a small amount of firewood, but this guy does not need any pottery. So stranger one just takes a certain amount of salt, and he's going to pay this guy in salt, and he's going to get firewood in return. So stranger two now has a bag of salt. Salt lasts a long time. It's easy to transport. It's divisible. And most people need it because it keeps food very fresh. So he knows that he can spend this salt at some point in the future to get whatever it is that he needs. And this is what a medium of exchange is. And it just like IOUs, and it's a simple and powerful solution that enhances cooperation. And instead of an IOU, it's something tangible. And a great example of these tangible medium of exchanges are these mining operations that, we know that at least 100,000 years ago, there was financial cooperation on a very sophisticated scale. We'd pull off relatively major mining operations. So these operations would use an enormous amount of people. You got to pay them, you got to feed them. People would have to transport the mine material, resellers, management, investors up front. It's a very sophisticated operation. IOUs would not work in this kind of operation. So you had this large group of strangers, and they're all exchanging these tangible items as a medium of exchange, and they can cooperate to the extent to make these very large operations possible. And it wasn't just salt and wheat. Pretty much anything throughout geography and time that could satisfy these properties were used somehow, some way as money. And we're not going to cover gold and silver again. We've already covered them like 5 times. But we know that they emerged alongside wheat, salt, and cattle. The precious metals were very good at these properties, and it was their natural rarity. Their supply was not easy to increase when the demand for them as money went up. So this ensured they would store their value, and this gave them more value density and made them very, very effective at these properties. And then back to the value density, this amount of gold was equal to the same as this amount of wheat. So a lot more purchasing power in a small place. So if you look about 5,000 years ago, this was the peak of decentralized finance. So anybody could own these tangible items and use them on a peer-to-peer basis, person to person directly, in exchange for anything you need with anybody else. So, and everybody in society was always looking for ways to improve money. It's half of every exchange. It's half of all we do. And one of the things that emerged was blacksmiths over time started to standardize these metal chunks got turned into standardized metal chunks, and this was enormously helpful. And as society grew more interconnected, we started to get large cities, tens of thousands of people, more mature governance. We started to see government coinage. And this is we're going to use Rome as an example, but government coinage did exist a couple thousand years roughly before the Roman Empire. So this is a fusion of government power and a monetary solution. And there are benefits to this. I mean, these coins are easy to recognize, harder to counterfeit, and counterfeit was punishable by law, by death. So counterfeiting did not have to worry about that as much. And now we have all of these various dispersed locations, all of their specialized goods, and we could bring all of this labor and goods and services much closer together. This made for a very convenient cooperation amongst a very large region. But you do have now, in the monetary system, you now have a central authority. You have one entity who is now in charge of the coins. And we talked through some of the downsides of this in previous videos of debasement. The monetary gatekeeper can debase the coins, and at first they would just clip off the edges, and they'd use the shavings to create more coins, and the amount of precious metal never changed. It was just siphoned from individuals and redistributed to whatever the state priorities were. But is known as debasement, since instead of clipping edges, Rome started diluting their coin, adding non-silver metal, which is to say they were debasing the silver in the coin. So now you have a person who holds money issued by the state, and he's still going to go and do a peer-to-peer, physical transfer of a coin. But now in this construct, there is a third party present that has the ability to siphon purchasing power off of these coin holders. And this mechanism to siphon and put it in here, create this little bucket of basically embezzled funds, is also very largely disguised and hidden from the holders of these coins. And Rome is the first of countless examples. The gatekeeper can vastly steal purchasing power from coin holders in just a matter of a short time. So, here, if you had all of your life savings in the denarius under your mattress, is a very bad situation for the users of that money. So now we have this gatekeeper capability, and we have to trust this entity that they will not take advantage of this. They're not going to use it against us as the users. They're not going to use it against our best interests. And so by 1531, we had the start of our first worldwide network of banking. And northern Italy was the start of modern day banking, not too far from the Roman Empire center of power. And there were a lot of families, not just the Medici family, but this is the most prominent. So so imagine something like Game of Thrones, where you have a bunch of families, and they are doing they're competing against each other. They're doing prearranged marriages, over many generations. They're doing family tree fusions of blacksmiths, goldsmiths, business, trade. They're fusing all of this together to compete with each other, fusing in politics, and that is how the banking industry was formed. And this is a good way to view, the first banking construct. Is on top here is the highest form of money. This is what nature gives us. This is the precious metals. And then down here in this layer is a promise or a receipt that you can bring it to this person and redeem it for your real money. And then blacksmiths, they were the original trustees. And if you had a lot of precious metal, it was a lot safer to keep it with someone who could store it safely. And then we had the banking industry, started about 1,000 years ago, and not just receipts. The banks could also issue loans, and then up here, this could also include bank assets, coins, or real estate maybe. And then gradually the receipts became standardized. And by 1531, we had an international bank exchange location. So here we have banks from various nation states, and they each have unique assets, different varieties of loans and whatnot that they've lent out to their users, and they can all show up in one place, and they have a way to standardize the value of all their differences and transact. And but look at this now from a user point of view. We have someone living in this nation state. He can now travel 1,000 miles to this nation state, and he can pay this guy this 20. So now this guy takes 5, puts it in his bank, and then he goes back later, a few months later, and he pays this person's friend $15. So for the users here, this is very convenient. But behind the scenes now, we have a banking industry doing a lot of work. This bank now has 5 units of this bank's assets. They're going to meet in Antwerp on an annual basis. They're going to go through their ledgers, discover that he owes him 5 units, and they have this standardization exchange solution. They'll do the exchange behind the scenes. But the catch to this is now the banking industry or the gatekeeper has the ability to issue more receipts than the actual precious metals on hand. And blacksmiths were quick to do this, well prior to this. They would see all the metal they were storing for their customers just collecting dust. Not everyone's going to come back at once to get their metal. And this is another form of debasement. It was creating this additional money, but it's more pernicious because coin clippings are debasement. There were easy ways for the average user to physically tell a difference in the money. But with paper money that's not backed by metals, you can't really tell it apart. You can't see the money supply being inflated. And this also creates a fragile situation where you run the risk of a bank run. So if for some reason these 3 individuals all show up at the same time, the bank will have to limit the amount of money they can give back, or in some situations, there's some unlucky person will actually lose all of his money. So so now from a user point of view, you're still holding a physical item. And this item now, though, is just representing the real money, the metal on the top of the triangle. And you can use this to do an exchange. But the value of this is also now susceptible to any mistakes that your bank might make. And this note could even become completely worthless, like overnight, in some scenarios if your bank goes insolvent. So then not too long after this, we had the first company stock issued, the DEIC, the first stock market, also centered on DEIC owners, and the government here converged on this and got itself involved because it wanted to help its national economic interests, which was supporting this company, which, the international spice trade, and this gave us the first central bank. And then another method was devised that would essentially create money out of nothing via loans. So a loan would be made out of nowhere with the understanding that, well, hey, a loan to the government is just as good as gold because we know the government's gonna pay it back. And then by the 18th century, this nation state money construct had evolved into this. This is where states had gold reserves plus their own national debt obligations, their own loans given to them, and they had a state bank which would issue assets to. Then they had a state bank which would issue maybe special assets or loans now to the bottom layer on the triangle. And then these local banks would loan out against these assets to their customers. So now your monetary network has two different gatekeepers, and then also multiple ways to cheat with creating additional money. And then nation states were being adopted around the world. They each issued their own currency. So now we can see now this closed, the concept of a closed network. So each nation's money construct was a closed monetary network. The only point of entrance or exit was through the state government. So there were no outside currencies that you could use as otherwise that you could use. So that what this means is there was no competition for the quality of money that you can use. So there was a monopoly on the control of money. And all of these items here that may work against the users, now there's really no natural competitive mechanism to keep those items in check. And then for another topic, these nation-state banks would also had to exchange amongst each other. So here we have two businessmen. They're doing an international transaction. This payment goes through this central bank over to this central bank to this user who then ships the goods. And in the nation states are going to do very frequent transactions, and they're going to do it in paper. And then once a year or so, they're going to do a final settlement in gold at a agreed upon central location, because gold is just very hard to transport. And these two activities themselves also become very centralized. So most nation state banks would converge on just one currency to send back and forth. And this is known today as the world reserve currency. But it just makes settlement in gold, it brings more standardization to your annual settlement, makes it a lot simpler. And then when it comes to the actual annual final settlement, countries would literally, put gold on a boat, or they'd put it on a horse, and they would transport it, and they would find a way to, exchange their gold, their precious metal, so they could settle up they would do their final settlement of all their debts to each other. But since gold was heavy to move, what this eventually converged to was, this is a diagram from a closet in the Bank of England, an underground closet from 1930. So all of the different countries' gold had essentially just been moved to one location in different closets and a basement under the Bank of England. And anytime they wanted to settle, do a final settlement, they would just roll the gold from one closet to another. And then we have, so that was 1930. Then we have World War II. Europe was in turmoil. U.S. production was off the charts. All the gold moved to the United States. Post World War II, 1944, Bretton Woods. All international currencies, all currencies were pegged to the U.S. dollar, which was pegged to gold. And then in 1971, Nixon removed the dollar's peg to gold. And there's an example here too. Is he had to do this because the United States had issued way too many dollars than they had, gold backing it. This was mostly to pay for the Vietnam War. So this picture is getting a little excessive, but the point is that for the end user here of a money, there are now many layers of centralization. This end user has to worry about his local bank and the risk associated with his local bank of default or inflation, his nation state bank default or inflation, and then whatever bank happens to own the world reserve currency at the time also might not be working in this user's best interest. So now comes the age of online banking, our modern age, and now we have these new abilities of the gatekeeper to where you could flip a switch and you could cut off a person's access to their funds, and then there's also the ability to easily surveil people's financial transactions, and this could infringe on expectations of privacy. So we started off with this open network. If you owned a piece of metal, precious metal, you could exchange it peer to peer for any other item in a market, and there was no third party involved. But as the Bronze Age and paper and Industrial Revolution and our society grew more interconnected, these naturally occurring tools in nature just could not keep up, and we had to rely on our self-organized governments. These created these closed monetary systems, where the government currency was the only currency allowed within a certain geographic region closed network, and while this construct keeps most of the properties of money, it's these gatekeepers, these middlemen with no outside competition to worry about, with the monopoly over this construct, have been incentivized to abuse all of the power that comes with the status of gatekeeper, and that has led to one of the properties of money being eroded.